All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Laura Redford, and I am a board member of the John A. Woodsoe Foundation. And I'm so thrilled to be here with you this Sunday evening. Thank you for spending your time with us. Our format this evening is a little different than other conversations that I have hosted. Tonight, we are pleased to present a presentation on the Saints of Madagascar and the work of the Bountiful Children's Foundation. And before I introduce our distinguished guests for the evening, I want to remind you that to participate after the presentation, we're going to have a question and answer session that I get to moderate. And if you'd like to ask a question, there is an Ask a Question feature at the bottom of your screen. You can pose a question there at any point during the presentation. You can vote on questions that you like. The more votes a question gets, the higher it goes on the list that I see. So we encourage you to please ask your questions there. You're also welcome to participate in our chat, but know that if you pose a question in the chat feature, it won't be in the question list. So use the questions there. Let me start by introducing our guests. Gloria Gardner-Reese has lots of international development experience. Although she has lived an active and rich life, she caught flight midair in marrying Bob Reese nearly 3 years ago. Madagascar became a honeymoon sorts a year later, which seemed an intense version of work she has done with students in China, India, and Nepal, alongside her work teaching English. Her undergraduate degree was in nutrition and dietetics. Graduate work was in cultural communication and communication and aging. Her sweetest work has been as mother of 6 vibrant children and grandmothering their 11 sprightly offspring. Now she has Bob's marvelous family as well. Bob Reese is the Director of Mormon Studies and visiting professor at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. He previously taught at UCLA, go Bruins, UC Santa Cruz, and UC Berkeley, and was a Fulbright Professor of American Studies in the Baltics. His study of the Book of Mormon, A New Witness of the World, has just been published by Common Consent Press, and his edited Why I Stay, The Challenges of Discipleship for Contemporary Latter-day Saints, is forthcoming from Signature Books. He is the co-founder and current vice president of the Bountiful Children's Foundation. Again, remember to ask your questions at the bottom of the screen. I very much look forward to this presentation and learning more about the foundation along with you and for our conversation afterwards. I will turn it over to Bob and Gloria now.
Thank you so much for taking time to spend this hour with us. The Bountiful Children's Foundation, which at one time was known as the Liahona Children's Foundation, has been serving malnourished children around the world since 2008. We're the only nonprofit focused exclusively on addressing malnutrition among Latter-day Saint children, who constitute about 50% of the children we serve. That is, we address malnutrition among both Latter-day Saint and non-Latter-day Saint children. Our mission is to provide nutritional supplements for pregnant women and lactating mothers, and to nurture the potential of infants and toddlers to lead healthy, productive, and self-reliant lives through the elimination of malnutrition. Beginning with one small community in Ecuador, the foundation currently offers a nutritional program for malnourished children, as well as I mentioned, as pregnant women and lactating mothers in 200 states in 17 countries, from Mongolia to Madagascar and from the Philippines to Peru. In 2020, the foundation distributed nearly 10,000 monthly supplements to the pregnant and lactating women, and over 75,000 monthly supplements to malnourished children. Malnourishment, as I think most of you know, is a serious global problem, one that has certainly gotten worse during this pandemic. As you can see from this slide, many millions of children suffer from malnutrition, and more than 5 million perish annually from its effects. Because of the success of the Church's missionary program in taking the restored gospel to many countries with high levels of malnutrition, that is, to taking what is called the great invitation of Jesus the Great Commission to his disciples to go into all the world, it's not surprising to find acute and chronic malnutrition among many Latter-day Saint children whose parents and grandparents have been converted to the gospel in the developing world. We estimate that the number of malnourished children currently worldwide is between 350 and 400,000. Of those, perhaps 150,000 are the children of active Latter-day Saint parents, although our program is open to any child who comes to our screening. Currently, the number of children served by the foundation, that is, if you look at, there are 350 to 400,000 malnourished children in the church worldwide. The Bountiful Children's Foundation is able to address the needs of only 10% of those, or less than 10%, which means that we're serving only a fraction of the children who need help, which is one of the reasons why we are happy to have you come to learn more about our work. The intervention package that we offer is a daily nutritional supplement. We give a biannual micronutrient supplement, and also we deworm the children, since worms is one of the problems why many children suffer from malnutrition. We also try to educate the families about how to use what meager sources they have in order to provide better nutrition for their children. Our work benefits from the association with 2 BYU departments. We're very happy that we have, in the past few years, been able to rely on the good services of the faculty and staff of the BYU Department of Sociology, which does evaluation and assessment, and on the Department of Public Health, which advises us on things relating to children's health. One of the least known benefits of the Church's missionary program is that returned missionaries are returned missionaries who establish humanitarian programs. Sometime I may write an article about this. It's really wonderful where we travel in the world to do this work, that we meet people from returned missionaries who have started nonprofit programs to serve the people that they once taught the gospel to. Examples of 2 such programs with whom we worked in Madagascar are Elevatus, started by Michael O'Day, a returned missionary from Madagascar, and Mada Health, another nonprofit begun by Dr. Jackson Bell, also a returned missionary. Elevatus, which administers our program, as I mentioned, also focuses on microcredit, on education. Gloria and I visited one of their schools there, and it was just a wonderful school. It's wonderful to see such a group of bright students learning in a very supportive environment. They lift women and girls out of poverty, and they have a micro lending program. In fact, we purchased some hats that one of the women who got a grant from Elevatus was able to use to weave hats and sell them on the street market. And Elevatus is also focused on eliminating sex trafficking of children. Mada Health, as I mentioned, begun by Dr. Bell and his associates, is bringing healthcare specialists to Madagascar to offer free healthcare. While we were there, what's really interesting is Dr. Bell had just come back from the southern part of Madagascar, where he found among a population of 1 million people, only 1 practicing pediatrician. Can you imagine that? A number of years ago, Dr. Brad Walker, who was a returned missionary from Central America, was visiting there, and one of the stake presidents was a physician, and he invited Brad, who was a physician, to go with him to the hospital. And in the hospital, this doctor was taking care of a severely malnourished Latter-day Saint child, who you can see in this picture. That child died not long afterwards. But seeing that child, being aware for the first time of the seriousness of malnutrition, Dr. Walker and I and a couple of other people, Polly Walker and Sarah Walker, 3 members of the Walker family, joined together to form this foundation, and we've been growing ever since. Just want to say a little bit about malnutrition. Basically, there are 4 broad categories of undernutrition: wasting, stunting, underweight, and deficiencies in vitamins and minerals. All of these are serious. Undernutrition makes children in particular much more vulnerable to disease and death. That is, if you are suffering from malnutrition, your body is much less capable of resisting diseases. Wasting is one of the categories. It means low weight for height. You can be of average height, but you're much below average in terms of weight. Stunting is low height for age, and it's a result of chronic recurrent undernutrition, usually associated with poor socioeconomic conditions. And one of the reasons we're trying to address malnutrition among this generation of children is that malnutrition becomes a cyclic condition, so that children grow up because of malnutrition, and their children tend to be poor and malnourished too. So if there's a way to interrupt that, that's one of the ways to do it, is to take care of those children. The children with low weight for age are known as underweight. A child who's underweight may be stunted or wasted or both. And as you can imagine, the long-term effects of malnutrition are delayed mental and motor development, poor school performance. Many of these kids cannot succeed in going to school. Reduced intellectual achievement, increased susceptibility to disease and illness, adult functional impairment, decreased work capacity, and reduced economic productivity. All of these have both an immediate and a long-term impact, as you might imagine. Because we have limited funds, we focus on the first 1,000 days of a child's life, as well as on the prenatal period. And one of the reasons we focus on the first 1,000 days is that is the period of a child's life when the greatest growth and of both the brain and the body. 80% of a child's brain develops in the first 3 years, and 90% by the first 5 years. And so you can imagine that a child who is not nourished properly, who does not get an intervention, is his body, but especially the brain, is severely compromised. And the problem is that once they pass that 1,000-day period and that damage is done, it is not reclaimable. So this nutrition is, as I mentioned, is significantly evidenced by incidents of impaired adult IQ and physical growth as well during the first life. These significant problems for the rest of their lives. So this is why addressing it now is important. I might say that worldwide, the nations had set a goal to eliminate malnutrition by 2030, and we're making good progress for that. When I was in Peru a couple of years ago, Peru was one of the countries that had made significant progress in reducing malnutrition. But the pandemic has set that back, and probably will take a long time to recover from that. This picture of, you can see that a child born with an IQ of 100 who suffers from moderate or acute malnutrition and does not get proper help will drop one standard deviation, or nearly 20 points in IQ, and could drop another 14 points. And so you can see that, and we treat the children who are really moderately acute malnourished and severely acute malnourished. So these losses, as I mentioned, are from. So think about the implication for this. Think about if your own child had lost that much IQ in the first 3 to 5 years of life. The implications for the family and the families and for the societies and for the church. Not only will the children be unsuccessful in elementary school, they're unlikely to attend and succeed in secondary school, much less likely to be able to be well employed, less likely to establish a successful family, probably less likely to go on missions or take leadership positions in the church, and to serve meaningfully in their congregations and communities. The fact is, they are more likely to remain dependent on their families, governments, and the church, so that malnutrition increases dependency. And I think this is significant for a church that focuses on self-reliance. And I might stop to say that sometimes people say to us, well, you're taking care of these children, aren't you going to make them dependent on the church? And I was in a meeting with some general authorities a few years ago when somebody raised that. And I said, by God's design, children are dependent on adults. No child, as opposed to, say, as some animals, no child is able to begin taking care of his or herself from the beginning. So a child depends on families, on churches, on governments, on communities to take care of them until they can get to a point where they can begin learning how to take care of themselves and to be self-reliant. And as I said to the people in this group, the best way to teach self-reliance to a child is to keep her alive long enough so she even understands what that concept means. So one of the questions that often comes up in our presentations is, what is the church doing to address malnutrition? For the past several years, the Church Welfare Department has been studying malnutrition among Latter-day Saint populations in the developing world, beginning with some pilot programs that they've conducted in the Philippines. And out of those pilot programs, and with our work, which they're working with us, they are designing a plan for addressing malnutrition globally in the church. And that plan is based on the following principles, according to Luis Manuel, who's the senior manager for the welfare and self-reliance services. First, the church is working with the international areas. As most of you know, the church is working to, through its programs, many things are localized within areas. Area presidents have a great deal of autonomy. So the areas determine when, where, and how the programs are to be implemented. The program approach is rather broad and comprehensive, and strives to address the most common root causes of malnutrition, including dietary culture, access to nutritious foods, awareness, deworming, etc. And the local church councils at each ward and stake have councils, and they are key to assessing the levels of malnutrition and establishing the appropriate intervention to help families and their wards and branches. And the families themselves own and stand at the center of these intervention plans. So they work with local councils and ministering brothers and sisters to address the nutrition needs of the children. And so these interventions include church, government, community, and family resources. This process is now rolling out, as I mentioned. It's begun in the Philippines, and they hope soon to be doing it in Guatemala and maybe even in parts of Africa this spring. I'm now going to turn the time over to my beautiful wife, Gloria.
I'm going to move this just a little. Well, hello. I am so happy to be here, and nutrition is very dear to my heart. And I remember that was one of my favorite aspects is world health when I was studying in my days. With that next slide, we'll see this is not the poinsettia that I have over there by the window. Mine has not fared terribly well, but poinsettias are abundant throughout Madagascar. And one man pulled off a leaf and he folded it in half and he said, voila, you see the shape of Madagascar. So if we'll see the next slide with the map. Well, there's this leaf itself. Yes. And so that spine, you see, is the eastern part of it. And this island, Madagascar, is larger than California and almost the size of Texas. But I like thinking of California because it's a little more that shape. And most of the people have clustered in the Central Highlands. And on the eastern coastline, there are a lot of coves on the western part. But it wasn't until about 500 AD, which is late, that explorers found unoccupied land there in Madagascar, the whole land. But surprisingly, they weren't from close by. They came from Borneo and Indonesia, India, Arabic countries, and Persia. They all came to the island. Then the neighboring Africans ventured in about 1000 AD, 500 years later. So their culture, their language, and their food are all more akin to Asia than they are to Africa. In Madagascar, 90% of the wildlife and flora and fauna is unique to the island. Various chameleons, iguanas, tomato frogs, indri, and about 100 different species of lemurs and other creatures. And they were so delightfully surprising, hopping on our backs in the second park we went to that had been these lemurs had been domesticated at some point. And this next slide is the Rava Palace. The queen, I haven't got her whole name here. I meant to get it. Rava is all I could say easily, though. To understand the current situation of Madagascar today, I'll highlight a little bit of the curious and colorful history. So in the 1800s, Madagascar was ruled for a 33-year period. Her husband, it was a king, and he died, and then the queen took over, and she was ruthless for 33 years. But she did do some good things. She invited Christian missionaries from London for the advantage of the Western thinking that would give her people. But by the second half of her reign, she saw these same people forsaking the customs and the rights of their ancestors and their indigenous traditions, and they were very ingrained. She used trials by ordeal for any Christians in other distance, and that ended up eradicating the whole population of the country by half in a 6-year period. So those bizarre tactics and isolationist policies garnered her the title of Mad Queen Rava. This is Antananarivo. You see the from the castle there, or from the palace. So after the 1800s, after that period of time of the Mad Queen, the island was colonized by the French, who had won out over British influence, and in 1896, took over, and they gained access also to Madagascar's timber and exotic spices. This land is rich with possibility. Then finally, after several rebellions, the Malagasy people regained autonomy in 1960. But with the French governing powers toppled, all aid from Western sources ceased and sunk them into further poverty. So there's a lot to overcome, but today the country is 41% Christian, 52% indigenous with 18 distinct indigenous groups, and 7% Muslim. So this young government, since 1960, now 60 years old, is still victim to instability and corruption. A good infrastructure was never really built. Not even slightly. There are only 11% of the roads that are paved. Most are potholed and muddy. The driver often has to almost stop or go to a creek to go around the potholes. On holidays, you could walk faster than you could drive. The one holiday we were there, and there's almost no rail service, and therefore transporting agriculture to the cities is difficult. The rural people get it. Only 12% of the population has running water and flush toilets. And probably 50% of the children, just under 50% of the children under the age of 5 are underweight. 90% of the trees over a couple of centuries, but still 90% of the trees have been cleared for their value in building and because they're hardwoods, and also to enable a mining craze. So people would clear the land and dig, but they'd also have to reroute rivers and do other things that were damaging because of this mining craze that came in the late 1990s, and still going up into 2017. And I'm not sure if it's still happening as with such abundance. But it also meant that there was a loss of about 2,300 tree species with medicinal properties. And also, few trees means that the water surface is often contaminated with raw sewage. So in this country, 70.7% of the people live below the poverty line, and they make something like between $1 and $2 a day. And yet the people are industrious. That's the next slides, in trying to rise above all these circumstances. And they've got a very active street life of making wares and selling them. 60% of the people are under the age of 25, and the median age is 20. So that's mighty low. 4 children per woman is the average. And so the population is growing quickly also. As to the church in Madagascar, for many years, Madagascar was served through the South African Johannesburg mission until the late 80s, when one Malagasy man was converted in France. He returned to the island nation and began sharing the gospel with friends and family, and became the first branch president. And I would tell you his name, but it would take so much of the alphabet and tongue twisting, I don't think I could do it justice. This small beginning has grown into 2 stakes, which you'll see on the next slide is one of those stakes. I mean, yes, it's a large building, and within this building there are family services and welfare services and family history areas. Anyway, there are 2 stakes now in Antananarivo. It's also known as Tananarive, or Tana for short, and 2 districts exist there in outlying areas, with branches and small group meetings convening in homes on hillsides and in remote crevices of the land. The church has been a stabilizing factor, inspiring full-hearted leadership that was so precious to watch among the members in just the 20 years since it was established as a mission. Today, there are about 13,000 members in 49 congregations. Well, in 2011, President, then Apostle Nelson, visited the saints in Madagascar, and he was one of the first apostles to visit the country since Elder Richard Scott dedicated the land to the preaching of the gospel in 1999. We're going to show you without sound, unfortunately, the first 70 seconds of this video that was made of that visit. And we'll try and speak to it a little bit as it goes.
I'm very optimistic about the future for the church in Madagascar and for the people of Madagascar. As you go up and down the streets, you see the people in the rice paddies planting their rice underwater and washing their clothes at the side of the river. And yet, from that, came these people to church, all dressed in their white shirts for the men and lovely dress for the ladies. So a people that can rise above their environmental challenges, whose faith is stronger than their physical limitations. Those are just some of the things that make me feel so optimistic for them.
When we were there, they had a choir that Bob went up and said, "I haven't heard the Tabernacle Choir sound this good," and he was so pleased. But it was full gusto with which these people sang and memorized texts, and tremendous energy in their service to each other as well.
Madagascar is a beautiful island country off of the coast of Southeast Africa. It is larger than California and has a population greater than all of Australia. Shockingly, 92% of the country is surviving on less than $2 a day, making it one of the poorest countries in the world. As a result, half of all children in Madagascar suffer from chronic malnutrition and stunting. We at Liahona Children's Foundation have partnered with Elevate Us, a local NGO in Madagascar, to tackle these high levels of childhood malnutrition. Our mission is to nurture the potential of infants and toddlers to lead healthy, productive, and self-reliant lives by eliminating malnutrition. To accomplish this, we are teaching families about nutrition, promoting the exclusive breastfeeding of infants for the first 6 months, and providing nutrient supplements to pregnant women, infants, and toddlers. To identify the acutely malnourished, we conduct health screenings that are relatively simple. We measure the height and weight of children and compare those numbers to World Health standards. Participants are re-screened every 6 months to track their progress. When children don't get the nutrition they need during the first 1,000 days of their lives, the consequences are dire. They suffer lowered IQs, weakened immune systems, and they struggle to keep up in school. This leads to difficulty finding and keeping employment later in life that results in their children too suffering from malnutrition. This is a cycle that we are committed to breaking. As an organization founded by the Latter-day Saints, you place special emphasis on eliminating malnutrition among all LDS children in Madagascar. We need your help to reach every congregation in Madagascar. You can help ensure that every child receives the critical nutrition that they need to lead healthy lives now and in the future.
We were going to show.
This is some of that meeting that we went to right here. People outside. I didn't see the other two slides, but I think there are.
This wonderful sense of community. I think that's one of the things, wherever we've gone in the world, that Latter-day Saints feel a sense of community and a sense of identity. And one certainly sees that in many ways in Madagascar.
So on to let's go back to that other slide. Let's go backwards. Yes, right there. When we have screenings, the parents bring their children, be evaluated, and it can be chaotic, but the screenings are technical, so we arrange them in an orderly fashion, and they are wonderfully patient because this means so much to them to have their children evaluated. So go ahead and we'll show you how they lined up. They were there for quite a while. We were feeding them through. The reason we were able to take them fairly fast was because we had so many missionaries that volunteered to come and be with them at that time. I think the next slide will show that to you. We had 10 missionaries that joined us and some others in the group that I'll be identifying later. We were assisted by our coordinators, Monica and Manda, and I think the next slide, Monica and Manda, as well as Tim and Jake Zollinger, who was, he's been on a couple and is ready to go on the next Nutra tour too. But they were such, just strength. So the next slide shows Tojo Harry. He's a young Malagasy scholar that we were able to be involved with for a while there, who has conducted a number of interviews with Malagasy saints, which are in the archives at the Claremont University Mormon Studies Center. So Tojo Harry was awarded a fellowship to study at Florida State University. Yeah, PhD, and is currently studying in the church in Africa and its influence and so forth. Well, the next few slides will show various steps in the screening process. Everybody's brought in and they're registered, recording personal and demographic information about the children, their weight, age, gender, and we measure their height. There's, I'm taking these pictures and remembering them so clearly. According to, and there's Jake. According to the WHO, these 4 data points tell us immediately whether or to what degree a child is malnourished. And in the 4 screenings we did in Madagascar, the lowest percentage of malnourishment we found was 55% of those who came, and the highest was 90%. That was more of a smaller rural area, but people had come quite a distance to get there. And so they were the ones who were the more dedicated to help their children. As pointed out before, our program addresses the need of pregnant women. And let's go through those slides a little more. Here, this one, pregnant women and lactating mothers. So here we have, back to that slide, is a mother who's nursing her baby. I didn't realize I had that. And another mother whose child is eating some of the pumpy nut that is provided for these babies who are evaluated with the condition. So we send them these supplements home, but they have these supplements during pregnancy too. The women eat them because of their great nutritive value. And we rejoice when we find these babies that are in good health, that mothers who were found malnourished during the last screening 6 months ago were really happy to find that they were normal now due to our program. And now we'll go through some another series of quick photos, 4 or 5 seconds each, with moments during the screening. Bob is always loving to be with those babies and interact with them. We've done them in the Philippines, Guatemala, Peru, Colombia, tell me again, Kiribati, and elsewhere. And it is the children who always bring us this joy. In spite of the fact that they're malnourished, it's really wonderful to be touched by their innocence and their energy and their beauty. And then after the screening, we send the parents and the children whom we've identified as malnourished home with their first supply of nutrients. Now, as in all countries, I have to tell you, these kids would stand and pose for me, and I didn't ask them to. They just did. As soon as I was showing them the picture at the result, then they would pose for me and then want to see it. And as in all countries, the gospel encourages strong families, and we've got photos of 2 of those families eating the plumpy nut. This is Bishop Hari Raja Adrasan, whose daughters performed for us, and they've achieved beautifully academically, and we danced together and we sang together. And then the next is Julian Conot and his native wife. He went home from his mission back to France and returned again to give service to the country, and married and has this lovely baby. And then Tim Hari Hajare Jaona, forgive me, Tim and everybody. And they all welcomed us so warmly into their homes and their hearts. And we had a family home evening with Tim's family, and the children, we've got video of the children dancing and the girls singing and dancing too, and we all sang together. Back to Bob.
I was going back to what Gloria was saying. You can understand why Jesus loved children so much, and why the prophet Mormon talked about how his great love for children. They're so beautiful and innocent and honest, and just what can we say except they are the most beautiful things in the world. This next slide is taken of 2 boys, 2 Malagasy boys who were born on the same day. The one on the left is Toronto, has a normal growth. He received proper nourishment. The one on the right, Satraka, suffered from malnutrition, and again, you can see why just this dramatic difference between a child who receives proper nutrition and a child who doesn't. This slide always affects me because I realize that in these countries that are so poor, one of the things that I find is that when people sometimes say, "Oh, are these people going to become dependent?" The parents of these children, by and large, are among the most self-reliant people I have met. They are doing everything they can to feed their children. Some of them go without food probably many of them do, to feed their children, to give their children some food, but there's not enough. And sometimes their governments are poor, or they're not as well organized and functioning as they could be. So as I look at this slide and see the effects of malnutrition, and then you see, if in the next slide you see the effect on brains. The child on the left is a normal child, like the one you saw in that picture. The one on the right has a brain showing extreme neglect, and I think that I try to imagine that this child is one of my children. What a difference it would make or one of my grandchildren, what a difference it makes in the quality of life that they would have. And consider this, that for every dollar invested in saving these children, as healthy adults, they will return more than 30 times that amount. Every dollar that the foundation or the church or the government invests in addressing malnutrition will return many multiples, not only in terms of their earning power, but because of that, in the tithes and offerings they will pay, the quality of family life and service. And in other words, there's no good reason not to help these children. As someone has said, there is no time not to love. Let me see the next slide. There was one that I was missing. I guess I showed it earlier, of the change in the drop in IQ. There are different ways that you can get involved in supporting the work of the foundation. The first of these is to think about. We often say that we can all do something. Mother Teresa said, "We can do no great things, only small things with great love." That is kind of our family motto. What is amazing is that our foundation can provide the necessary nutritional supplements for a child for an entire year for only $100. In other words, for $100, you can change a child from being malnourished into being nourished, being properly nourished. That means that the cost of saving a child's life represents such a small sacrifice that anyone can make it. And most of us could do that many times over. In fact, we have individuals, families, extended families, and even groups of Latter-day Saints who adopt the malnourished children in an entire state in Guatemala, the Philippines, or elsewhere. So you can get involved by participating in, as Jake was doing, in a humanitarian nutritour. Go with us, help us screen these kids, and at the same time, you can see the country, you can participate in services, and you can just have really a wonderful time. It is, every time that we've taken people, it's just been wonderful for us and for them. You can, as I mentioned, you can adopt a community, and again, I say, if you take an extended family, we have some individuals who adopt all of the children in a stake in the developing world. That takes between $5,000 and $6,000 a year to address malnutrition. Members of our stake here in Northern California have done that for several years, and Gloria and I and our extended family have also done that, as have some of our friends. So one of the things you can do is to donate, contribute. If you go to Bountiful Children /donate, or just Bountiful Children, you'll find our website, and you'll be able to donate there, and donate either one time or monthly, and encourage other people to do that. You can do that by mentioning this on your website, on your Facebook, and elsewhere, and invite your friends to participate with these. Let me close by quoting Bishop David Burton, the presiding bishop of the church. In April 2011, he gave an address and conference called the Sanctifying Service of Welfare. And this is what he said: during the Great Depression, the commitment of church leaders to relieve human suffering was as certain as it was irrevocable. President Heber J. Grant wanted a system that would reach out and take care of the people no matter what the cost. He said he would even go so far as to close the seminaries, shut down missionary work for a period of time, or even close the temples, but they would not let the people go hungry. He added, no matter how many temples we build, no matter how large our membership grows, no matter how positively we are perceived in the eyes of the world, should we fail in this great core commandment, or turn our hearts from those who suffer and mourn, we are under condemnation and cannot please the Lord. Because I teach literature, and including the New Testament, one of my I've looked at the last sermons that Jesus gave. They are among his most profound. And one of his last great sermons is recorded in the 25th chapter of Matthew, gives the ultimate challenge to his followers. Inasmuch, he said, as you gave or didn't give the least to the least of these, you gave or didn't give to me. Jesus didn't speak Hebrew or Greek, he spoke Aramaic. And I love, there is a Bible translation of the Bible from Aramaic into English. It's the language that Jesus spoke. And this is the language, this is what Jesus said to his disciples. Inasmuch as you gave or didn't give food to one of these, my little brothers and sisters, you gave or you didn't give it to me. When we think about the least of these, think of these as if they were Jesus' own brothers and sisters. There's a wonderful Malagasy proverb: let your love be like the misty rains coming softly, but flooding the river. We invite your donations, misty rains, however you want to give, however you can, and let them become a river to feed and give water, nourishment to these needy children. You can donate on our website, as I said. Thank you for whatever you can do for Jesus, for his and for our little brothers and sisters. This is such joyful and beautiful work for us that we want everyone to have the feeling of what it takes to participate in it. So we invite you to do what you can and to help these children and their families, and want to thank you for whatever you can do. Thank you very much for participating in this, and we're happy to entertain any questions, Laura, that people might have.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that presentation. I learned a lot. I think after that, especially your last statement, Bob, there's an interesting question. which is what is the size of your annual budget and how much goes to administrative costs as opposed to the delivered project? And having poked around on your website, I love the answer that you're about to give.
It's a great question, a very thoughtful one, because all of us want to know what happens to the money we give. I'm happy to say that because we have one or two donors who give money to us to take care of administrative costs, that 100% of what you give will go to feeding these children. We have a very modest overhead, and as I say, we've been blessed by some generous givers who've helped us to cover that overhead. No member of the administrative or the board receives any compensation for this. We pay a modest stipend to our coordinators in these countries, very dedicated sisters who I think of one of the sisters in one of our coordinators in Guatemala who actually lost a child to malnutrition. And I found out that this modest stipend we were giving to her, she was giving back to us to take care of malnourished children. And I thought, if this sister could do that, no one, certainly in the developed world, none of us in the North American church cannot give something.
That's beautiful. I had a question. I read a very timely op-ed yesterday in the New York Times, written about global aid and about how, especially in Africa, it's been typically sort of white industrialized nations coming in and sort of employing or deploying their programs without a lot of boots on the ground. And I wanted to know a little bit more about how you use the coordinators in country and how you use and utilize the resources that are already there, people that are there to help them, let them help shape the program and to bless their lives as well.
Good, another great question. We try to work with other NGOs. We try to work with governments. We work with congregations. We try not to replicate anything that is already ongoing. We try to strengthen whatever programs that exist. We try to listen to the local people. We don't come in saying we can solve this problem. We say, how can we serve you? When I was in Peru a couple of years ago, I was with Albert Puertas, another member of Bountiful. We were able to address the Peruvian Parliament, and we talked to them about how we see this work as the shared work of anyone who has a passion to do it. I know that because I'm acquainted with USAID and the tradition at times that we've gone in as if we were the ones who had the information, we were the ones who knew had the solutions. We know because some of our people are associated with WHO and we work with physicians and nurses. We have this very simple program. We screen these children. We can tell immediately as soon as the screening's over. I begin a screening by saying, "This is a good news day." We're going to evaluate your children, and it's really good news if they're not malnourished. That means you've been doing a good job and you've got the resources. But it's also good news because if we find that they are malnourished, we can help you take care of them. And so we just try to listen and work with local people, use resources that we can, and try to use the resources we have. As I said, with all that we're doing, somebody asked the question, what is our budget? Our budget is about $1 million, and we are servicing a little bit less than 10,000 children with that. So you can see how we have grown from 30,000 in our first year to 1 million. So we're growing, but we have not been able to grow fast enough. And in fact, during this past year, we suffered some loss in donations, which meant that in some places we had to sometimes skip a month of providing nutritional supplements, which we never want to do once we start a program, but we simply didn't have the money. We do have, some of you belong to corporations, and your corporations have a joint program whereby they will match employees' contributions. Some of you know foundations. We work with foundations, and we're always happy when a foundation or a corporation will adopt this program as one they want to give to. So I know that the money which is spent, is contributed, goes to bless the children.
Great. There's a popular. People want to know, once the pandemic is over or under control, will there be additional humanitarian trips to Madagascar?
Indeed, there might even be one as early as this summer. We've had some discussion about it. We're kind of waiting to see. One of the things I might say, by the way, just by way of explanation, is that we have been trying to get into Venezuela. We have had some success, but Venezuela is a very politically unstable country right now, and so sometimes we have to look at the realities of what's on the ground and deal with those things, negotiate them. There are many countries that we are not in yet that we would love to be in. But one of the things we say, when you contribute, when you donate on our website, you can select the country you would like to go, your donation to go to. In other words, if you or a family member served a mission in Bolivia or in Ecuador or in someplace in Asia where we are, or Africa, we'd be very happy to have those funds go directly to those places.
The follow-up question that just disappeared. Somebody wanted to know what a typical day in the field looks like when you do a nature tour. What is the screening process like? How does that happen?
It's a great question. It's never quite the same, but generally we work through the stake presidents and through the bishops and Relief Society presidents, and we set a day for screening. And so we have a place that's generally a stake center or a chapel, and then we show up. We contact the local, if they're local services, sometimes there's Red Cross or other services, and we invite them to come and join with us in these screenings. And then so we set up a station. We set up 4 stations. The intake station, whereby we take their names and their addresses, their ages, and their gender. And then we set up a station for measuring them, their height, and another one for their weight. And then we do an output whereby when they get through that, we have their information, and we put the age, gender, height, and weight into a computer, and we know immediately where they fit on the scale that World Health Organization has provided for us. And so we can say this child. Sometimes we were screening in the mountains of the Philippines about 5 years ago, and it was a new chapel, and it was way up in the mountains, beautiful country. And I know that the church decision to build a chapel depends on the percentage of priesthood holders who pay tithing. So I knew that there was probably a pretty high level of tithe payers in this ward. And as we were taking these children through the screening process, this mother brought this little girl, and I picked her up and I said to my coworkers, "We need to find a doctor." I knew she was in trouble. So we were able to find a doctor, get her to a hospital. Sometimes you run into those kinds of issues, but so it's wonderful to see. Well, let me just finish this story. We finished the screening. We found that 70% of the kids in this chapel, or in this state, in this ward, in this state, were malnourished. And the next day, I happened to meet the state president, and I said, "I'm curious, President, what percentage of the people of your state pay tithing and fast offering?" He thought for a moment, and he said, "I would say it's about 70%, which is higher than any ward I've ever been in North America." And I just thought to myself, here are these saints who are paying their tithes and offerings, and their children are malnourished, some of them severely so. There are times when we generally, we get early to a screening, and I send some of the staff out to get cookies or candy or something, because sometimes these people come, and if it's in the summer, they're in a hot chapel. If it's in some countries, it's very uncomfortable. We get water. We get something for the kids to keep the kids quiet while we do this. And sometimes we play games with the kids while their parents are other parents are bringing their children through, and working with the missionaries. Yes.
I want to interrupt you to that story about being in the Philippines. And it's a question that someone posed on our page. It's Heather Hardy's question, which is, why isn't the church doing more? Why isn't the church, as an organization that does collect fast offerings and has resources, doing more in this particular area, recognizing how significant it is for all of the reasons that you talked about with development and growth?
Well, that's both a good and a difficult question. One of the things that I found out when I was working in Guatemala is that I said to a district president, here's a family who needs some help, not with malnutrition, but with just some shoes for the boys to go to school. And he said, I don't have any more. And I said, well, don't you go to the district president, the state president? He said, well, it's not encouraged. And so in some parts of the church, what would normally happen in North America, which is a bishop or a branch president would get fast offering funds, you can imagine that a ward where 70% of the children are malnourished, a bishop or branch president doesn't take in nearly enough money to take care of those people. And then and the stake wouldn't have that money either. And so I think the church is looking at how they can build a program that addresses this shortfall in these countries where there is not resource. It's our hope that the program the church is designing right now will do that. But at present, in some of these places, there's not the infrastructure in place to do that.
Thank you. Can you answer a question that I have? Just how do people actually get the supplements on it? Is it a monthly distribution? Do they go back for checkups? How are you tracking the progress and the success of the implementation?
Great question. We give them, right after screening, we give them a month's worth of this, and then the coordinator gets that to them. We generally set up a bank account or find some way that we can put funds so that the coordinator can buy local. So very often there is a local, a government may manufacture a nutritional supplement, or the coordinators are able to get in places where they don't have the supplements in the Philippines to get milk products, to get some form of protein product. So we rely on the coordinators. We work with them. We provide the funds, and we work with them to find the resource. source of supplements. And then we come back, and every 6 months we rescreen, and we can tell immediately if a child has gotten the supplements. I must say, again, it's heartbreaking if you're a mother who has a malnourished infant, but you also have a malnourished 4, 5, and 7-year-old. What do you do? I mean, that's a kind of Sophie's choice. But what we find is that most of the time, these children get the supplements, and they show this progress within a very short time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for telling us about the program at the Foundation and about the Saints in Madagascar, how the church is developing there. Both were fascinating. You're both doing such fantastic and important work. On behalf of the Foundation, I wanted to say thank you, and to those who have tuned in tonight, thank you very much. We will have a YouTube link posted in a couple of days of this presentation if you'd like to share it on the John A. Woodsoe Foundation website. Bob and Gloria have graciously agreed to hang around in the chat section if you have questions that they haven't answered for a few moments. You're welcome to do that. And on behalf of the Foundation, I would also like to tell you about our next event. It is Sunday, March 14th. Richard Turley, former church historian and member of the Church History Department and Woodsoe Board Foundation member, will host BYU Studies Director Stephen Harper in a live conversation about Joseph Smith's first vision and how the historical event impacts members of the church on a global scale. In order to register for that event, you can see it in the chat feature on the right. It will also be posted to the Foundation's website, which is thewoodsowfoundation.org. Thank you again to Bob and Gloria Reese and the Foundation.
Laura, let me just say one word, if I could.
Sure. Absolutely.
I'm pleased to say that the Mormon Studies Council at Graduate Theological Union here in the Bay Area is partnering with the John Woodsoe Foundation to do a Fireside on Holy Week on the 28th of March. So this is a week before Easter. You'll be able to see participants from both foundations, both centers, as well as some. Carolyn Pearson will be reading her wonderful drama about Holy Week. Lynn Wilson will be doing something on women during Holy Week. The president of the Woodsoe Foundation, Larry Easton, will be doing something on Passover, a celebration that he does with his Christian friends, and I'll be doing something on Holy Week. So we welcome you. It's a good way to begin Holy Week on the 28th of March.
Excellent. Please join us both on the 14th and on March 28th for that fantastic event. Thank you, everybody, for participating, and good night.